I'm Mike Sheridan, and this is The Delve. Hey, you're very welcome along to another episode of The Delve with me, Mike Sheridan. So my guest today is Brian Tyler Cohen. Brian hosts a podcast called No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, and he has a YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers. He does a lot of political commentary, and he's a bit of a superstar in Democratic circles. So what Brian will do is he will show a media clip or something from like Fox News or from CNN, something like that, and he will then analyze it afterwards very succinctly. He's excellent at it. But other than that, Brian also interviews. He has had, we chat about this, he has had amazing access to people who weren't not just previously high-ranking officials in the White House, but who currently are. Like, I think one of the last guests he had on, as I record this, was Ron Klain, who is Joe Biden's chief of staff, which anybody who knows anything about politics, that's pretty high up in terms of the White House, in terms of decision making, and in terms of having the ear of the current president of the United States. But Brian's a really good interviewer, and I think he describes himself probably more of an activist than anything else. He believes what he believes, and he's very passionate, and that really comes across in his videos. And I think that's why he's built a huge following that he has built. And I think anybody who understands or who is even a vague interest in American politics will know who Brian is, will recognize him at least. Anybody else, what Brian has built is really impressive. He has built a massive following off the back of really passion, and obviously he's got knowledge, he knows what he's talking about, but he's really built this independent media empire off the back of himself, off his own knowledge, off his own passion. So from that alone, if you're a creator out there, if you're somebody who has aspirations of creating content and getting that big following, this is a conversation worth listening to. So subscribe to Brian's podcast, It's No Lie, with Brian Tyler Cohen, and subscribe to his YouTube channel. He already has over 1 million subs, and it's popular for a reason. Enjoy the conversation. So how did this all start for you, Brian? How did the political commentary start? Because you're an actor by profession, right?
Yeah, so I started. I had moved to LA about maybe 10 years ago or so, and I initially come here to be an actor. I did some stuff here and there. It was fine, but I was really interested in politics, and so even while I was doing side jobs, I was working in a gym and I was a personal trainer for a little bit. I was writing articles and submitting them to publications, just basically as a volunteer contributor, and a lot of them got published, and so that was really where my heart was at.
Because you're very good direct to camera, and that's something that I don't think people realize how difficult it is to do. I'm not sure if you use auto cue or whatever, but no matter what, it's a tricky thing to do. So the acting background obviously helps with that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in performing, so even when I was in high school, I did the plays and stuff, and yeah, I'd wanted to be an actor for a good portion of my life, and I think once I really got into politics and was able to start, uh, churning out videos and writing my articles and stuff, I lost the interest in kind of going to auditions to say 2 words, about God knows what. And so I remember sitting there in my very last audition for, I don't know, Cheetos or something, something like so just not important, and just being like, yeah, this is the last time I'm ever going to do this. And I left the audition and called my agent and was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be coming in anymore. And they kind of read the writing on the wall, because I had started to publish a lot of videos and the YouTube channel was growing. And so they were like, yeah, we know. So,
It's working for you.
yeah.
At what point did you feel like it was working? I'm going to get into the political stuff, but I'm just genuinely interested, because I really enjoy the channel.
Yeah, thanks. It kind of hit a critical mass maybe 6 months in, and I remember doing it initially, and you know, putting out these videos that were bad, objectively very bad, in a suit that was too big. I didn't have a teleprompter, so I was just trying to remember as much as I could, and doing lots of cuts, and there was no music, and I think it was blurry. Didn't know how to work my camera or my sound. And obviously that's stuff that you learn on the way. But I was putting these videos out, and they were getting 30 views, 40 views, 50 views. And it wasn't for that. I mean, it was, I even when I had written articles, you don't know how many people are reading them. You just kind of do it because it's the right thing to do. You felt like it was important. So I would keep putting them out, and then some of them would hit, and I'd see hundreds of views on a video, and then I'd see thousands of views, and then tens of thousands. And as I continued to put them out regularly and with consistency, and tried to raise the quality with every video, and find clothing that actually fit me, I would see some videos really really do well, and the subscriber count grew, and it was off to the races from there. But it was a steady progression, and I think the consistency and me trying to do a better job with each video helped as well.
Because then I mean, you interview people as well, and obviously that's what I do for a living too. But the kind of access that you get is incredible. Like you had Ron Klein on very recently, Chief Joe Biden's chief of staff. Like it's incredible access.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky because a lot of people, it's easy for people to just be like, nah, I don't know, this is some YouTuber, like, nah, I'm all right. But I think that to their credit, a lot of these people within the Democratic Party are recognizing that they have to find people where they are, and not everyone is just sitting at home watching CNN all day. And in fact, the viewership for legacy media is declining year over year, especially now that the train wreck of the Trump administration is over, at least for right now, hopefully forever. But I think people look at YouTube, which is the second biggest website in the world, and look at Facebook, where I also publish videos, and at podcasts, where I also publish the audio version. And they recognize that if we want to reach people, we can't just reach this small subset of people who are watching mainstream media. That we have to find them on the internet. We have to find them, on podcasts. And so I think, to their credit, they're finally recognizing the importance of that, because the right wing has known that for a long time. They've been doing it for a long time, and they've propped up a lot of their creators and given them that validation. And so that's why you have, the Ben Shapiro's of the world who do quite well on the right. And so, to their credit, I think they recognize how important it is to kind of at least give a little attention and validation to those of us on the left who are trying to do the same thing.
The Republicans just seem like, and like obviously I'm in Ireland here, I'm in Dublin, but from the outside looking in, the Republicans just seem like they're just better at messaging, or they're just better at putting the messaging through. And I've seen you speak about this before. And is it that, like, is this got something to do with the nuance that Democrats are trying to convey? Should they just be cleaner? Like, what's the way around that?
Yeah, I think here's the difference. Republicans have a messaging apparatus on the right that is unabashedly, shamelessly Republican. And so Donald Trump would wake up and tie his shoes in the morning, and his whole staff would cheer, and then Fox News would cheer, and then Ben Shapiro and Dan Bongino and all of the right-wing media ecosystem would cheer, and they'd throw a military parade a couple days later because he tied his shoe, and they can just message the hell out of that. On the left, this is it's legacy media. It's real media, so to speak. So they're not going to do that. They're not going to just coddle the politicians on, quote, our side of the aisle, just because they're on our side of the aisle. And so it's ideally, like in a perfect world, you have the left, quote unquote, the left, who will focus on both sides, will treat both sides with the scrutiny that they deserve. And in an ideal world on the right, it's just anything that Republican politicians do is perfect, and we're gonna celebrate them until we're red in the face, and everything that Democrats do is terrible. And so there's this asymmetry that we're dealing with right now. And so, yes, they are better at messaging. Yes, they will go on air and say, make America great again, build the wall, gas prices are too high, whatever they need to say to either celebrate themselves or attack Democrats. And they will do it with the passion and the consistency that you need if you're actually trying to message effectively. But it's also, they have people bringing them over the finish line, and there is no equivalent for the Fox Newses and Newsmaxes and OANs on the left, nor should there be, because they're not acting in good faith. But I think that what we're seeing more and more are left-wing and progressive outlets who are at least trying to counter the disinformation, who are trying to push back, who are trying to celebrate the victories that Democrats do have. And so hopefully that will balance the scales a little bit.
Something feels like it's shifted in the last few years, and that like politics before was an argument at best. And I think, I mean, maybe it is Trump, I don't know, but there's something shifted when he came into office that it became almost personal. Like you couldn't be friends with somebody who was a Trump supporter, they couldn't be friends with you if you were a Hillary supporter, wherever it was. What was that shift, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that what the right wing does, what Republicans do, is they turn everything into a culture war, and they try to make every political issue an issue of identity. And so inherently that's going to be a more personal issue. Look, if you watch Tucker Carlson any random night, you might hear him talk about white replacement theory. Obviously, if that's something that you care about, then hearing that your heritage, your people, the whole ethnicity that you ascribe to is being replaced by other people, that's something that you take personally. And so while democratic politics might be, hey, we want a $15 minimum wage, we want legislation to combat climate change, we want to protect women's reproductive rights, we want pro-union legislation, whatever it is, these are policy goals. Versus on the right, you have basically issues of identity, and that's inherently going to be something that Republicans, or that their supporters, their followers, take more personal because of what that issue is. And I think they've figured out a way to make their issues all emotion based. And by the way, they have to, because they can't run on their platforms because A, there generally isn't a platform, and B, when there is a platform, it's cutting taxes for millionaires and billionaires. It's pretending that climate change doesn't exist. It's stripping women of their bodily autonomy. What of that are they going to run on? They can't run on any of it. And so they're forced to revert back to these culture war issues. And that's not even necessarily a bad thing for them because of how personal it is, how engaged it gets their supporters, So they've found their formula. And I think the hard part for us is reaching people on as emotional a level as the Republicans are reaching their supporters on.
Because you see Joe Biden polling at below 40% now. And part of me wonders if that's just cyclical now. Like this is just when people are annoyed at a predator or annoyed at something that's going on. Obviously, we're in unparalleled times with a global pandemic. But because Joe Biden is below 40%, this seems to be leading the news on so many, like every second night, every off night.
Yeah.
That he's, the second least popular president ever after Donald Trump. Is that just the way it is now? Is that going to be anybody who comes next or who comes after?
Yeah, look, I mean, yes, it's cyclical, and if you look at what happened after Obama's first term, there was such a rout in Congress that we basically, that's when the whole Freedom Caucus came in, and all the lunacy really began in Congress. But and then if you look at what happened at the end of Trump's term, I mean, he was always unpopular, but unpopular enough to lose his incumbency advantage and get voted out of office. Obviously, his situation is a bit extenuating, but nonetheless. But yeah, I mean, whether Biden is ultimately popular popular enough to be reelected, that remains to be seen. But I do think that there's a disconnect between the strength of the economy right now and the legislation passed versus the messaging. And that's what we were just talking about before. Because, if you look at what we're seeing right now with Biden, who is objectively, based on the polling, an unpopular president, that's still given the fact that, or despite the fact that we have about 6 million jobs that have been added in the last 10 months. That's more than any president ever in his first 10, 11 months of office. We have the lowest jobless claims since 1969. Child poverty has been cut in half, and that's thanks to the American Rescue Plan. Unemployment's at 4.2%. We have wages going up. So of course he's mired in a lot of the shit left by the previous president. And that shit was bad enough to make sure that Donald Trump lost, but it's still also bad enough that we're still feeling the impacts. COVID has obviously run rampant through this country. Donald Trump destroyed our ability to reach herd immunity by virtue of politicizing the virus every chance that he got. So unfortunately, with the political system and with people generally apathetic to politics in this country, uh, uh, the current president is going to take responsibility for the situation at hand. And so, for better or for worse, Joe Biden owns what's happening right now. So, but, it's a lot of these are just effects of the gross mismanagement previously. And so I think until we can really get COVID under control, will Biden be able to turn around and say, look, you voted me into office on the promise of me getting everything back to normal. Until he can get everything back to normal, he's still going to take a lot of flack for how difficult it is right now. The irony, of course, being that the very people stopping this country from getting back to normal are the Republicans, who have a vested interest in keeping it the way it is right now, because then they'll ultimately be the ones to benefit from it. So it's this constant, it's this constant battle that we're seeing right now. But unfortunately, there are a lot of bad actors here who have, like I said, a vested interest in keeping certain things bad, because they know that they can benefit politically, and so their priority is more to hurt Joe Biden than it is to help Americans, help their own constituents.
Is there any such thing now as normal, like politically? Obviously, the world's in a strange place, right? But politically, it's just, I wonder if there's any going back from how divided things are now. And America really does reverberate throughout the rest of the world. Like, as I said, I'm in Ireland here, and we get all of that news here too. The same in the UK. Like, COVID has been heavily politicized in the UK in particular. Ireland, not so much, but in the UK in particular. Like, is there any going back from this? And if so, how? How do people reach across the aisle? Do we have like normal Republicans and Democrats anymore?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't know that we can. I don't know how people like, yeah, I feel like we just hope that one day people are going to wake up and just, like in a zombie movie when some spell is lifted and people are like, oh, what just happened? It's not going to be like that. Like,
Yeah.
people who are rabid Trump supporters, who think that violence is an acceptable means to achieve their goals politically, who think that the election was stolen, who believe everything that Republicans tell them, who think that Hugo Chavez came back from the dead to meddle in the 2020 election, whatever it is. Like, I don't think that we're going to have some epiphany, some moment where these people just wake up and they're like, oh, that was crazy, So I don't know. I think what we just need to do is try to deliver some type of repudiation at the ballot box, because until they get some type of backlash, some type of reason to stop pushing forward with exactly what they're doing right now, it's just going to be more negative reinforcement. And so, when you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, when you have people like Paul Gosar and Matt Gaetz and all the people that you probably see overseas that are just doing some lunatic thing day after day, but these are the people who are making a ton of money off of fundraising. These are the people who are elevated by virtue of being booked on Fox News and all of the other right-wing channels. These are the people who are getting famous and achieving their goals. I mean, Madison Cawthorn, another first-year legislator, literally came out and said, I've built my office around comms and not legislation. These people are not there to legislate. They're not there to do the things that Americans elect politicians to do, which is to help them to make their lives better. They are there to get famous, to be the centers of their little universes, and to fundraise a lot of money, and to just be superstars in their own little ecosystems. And so I think until we see some change, until we see some type of major repudiation at the ballot box, until we see some type of backlash, unfortunately, the permission structure is there to just get more of that, to have more of these bad actors, to have more of these professional provocateurs kind of dominate the government. And you see how powerful they are. I mean, even the regular Republicans, right? Like the regular people who aren't, those social media crazy people, they're too afraid to stand up to them. And a lot of them bow out of their races, and they do it, in protest. But at the same time, normal Republicans bowing out, even if they're doing it in protest, only allows that void to be filled by someone who's louder, someone who has Trump's endorsement, someone who's willing to promote the big lie, whatever it is. And so right now we don't exactly have, you know, a political arena that's conducive to moderation or normalcy. Right now everything is pointing in the direction of it just getting louder and more polarized, and that's a bad thing. But what I try to do, what other activists try to do, what other YouTubers and crooked media with the Pod Save America folks, what everybody tries to do is just lay the foundation, lay the groundwork right now, so that we can continue to register people to vote, continue to reach young people as they continue to get registered. Obviously, they're much more progressive than older folks in this country, but I think we just have to come to terms with the fact that it's going to be a fight, and the job isn't to, the goal isn't to just end everything. Like, there is no, like I said, like, people aren't going to wake up one day and just it be over. And it just has to be that we've come to terms with the fact that we have to be willing to fight every election and to continue registering people. And once we've accepted that, then we can move forward and figure out what the best course of action is. And I think that's what we're doing right now.
You mentioned crooked media there, and I was just scrolling through social media before I started chatting to you, and I saw John Favreau had something up talking about how, I think it might have been a regram from one of the other guys, Pfeiffer maybe, and he was talking about how Democrats essentially are just been defeatist at the moment. Like, they're already looking ahead to November 2022 and losing seats in Congress and losing the Senate. It's obviously on a razor thin margin at the moment. Is that part of the problem as well? Like, there should not be some inherent optimism. Like, the Democrats have the White House, the Senate, and Congress, albeit, it's quite close, but they have them.
Yes. I think a lot of the pessimism comes from the fact that, for that exact reason, we do have unified control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. We have Democratic control in this rare sliver of time, because that doesn't happen often. We generally have split control of government. I think the issue comes when, even with that control, it's so hard, and it's so hard to get the stuff passed that we want to pass. And even as we're looking down the barrel of what is basically a general attempt to undermine democracy by Republicans, like, we're watching democracy under attack in slow motion right now, and we're seeing as nonpartisan election officials are purged. We're watching Republicans pass voter suppression bills across the country. Every day it seems to be something new. And even with that unified control of government, we can't figure out how to get any voting rights passed. We can't figure out how to ban partisan gerrymanders, even as we're watching new maps get signed into law, because it's the beginning of the decade, and that happens every 10 years. And so I think that's where a lot of the pessimism comes from. That's not to say that we shouldn't celebrate our victories, and that's something that I have to, like, tell myself. It's like, all right, when don't make the same mistakes as we did with Obamacare, which was the biggest piece of healthcare legislation of my lifetime, kind of came and went, and there was such a void that Republicans actually owned that messaging in what was, again, the biggest piece of healthcare legislation of our lifetimes, and it just basically turned into a matter of, oh, death panels are going to come in and decide whether you live or die, or oh, they have their website that was healthcare.gov, the rollout for which was so botched that you can't even use it. So they've completely filled that messaging vacuum with their own disinformation. So I think we have to see, when we pass legislation like the American Rescue Plan, like this latest infrastructure package, and hopefully like the Build Back Better Act, which would be a major economic and climate bill, that we have to that there's a lot of importance in making sure that we don't leave some void that Republicans can then fill. But at the same time, recognizing that we have these majorities, and we have to figure out a way to get the things done to fix the foundation of our democracy, because we have a year until midterms right now. It's December of 2021, and if we can't figure out how to get this stuff done, then it can allow Republicans to basically run roughshod over Democrats and continue to enact the anti-democratic measures that they're trying to enact. And and we won't even have the opportunity to fix this after, because we may very well be shut out of the House for a decade. And so I think that's where a lot of the pessimism comes. That's not to say that we're not pushing these people day after day, pushing the Joe Manchins and Kirsten Sinemas and other moderates of the Democratic Party to wake up and recognize the risk that's in front of us right now. But it's a delicate balancing act between trying to let these people know how important it is that they get a move on this stuff, that they get the kick in the ass that they need, with celebrating the accomplishments that we do have, because we have to give people who voted Democrats into office something, something to celebrate. We have to show them, look, this is why you came out. Now you have child poverty cut in half. You have, your lead pipes are being fixed, roads are being built. Hopefully we have universal pre-K and childcare and ACA subsidies and whatever else it is. So it's that balancing act that we're in the middle of right now.
When it comes back to that thing of messaging of, I don't think a lot of people realize what's in that infrastructure bill in terms of like high-speed broadband and all that stuff. But I don't want to keep you too much longer, Brian. The governor runs seem to have more significance this year than in previous years that I can remember. Being like kind of somebody who's kind of watched this stuff relatively closely, where you've got kind of Democratic superstars like Stacey Abrams and Beto O'Rourke running in Georgia and running in Texas. And then we've got somebody like Perdue running, at least in a primary in Georgia, and saying he wouldn't count. He would find those votes basically that Donald Trump was looking for. If it was him, he wouldn't have certified the election. Is this the most important that you've seen governor runs be in a midterm ever?
Yeah, I mean, for exactly that reason, we have between being able to veto maps, anti-democratic maps, gerrymandered maps, like we're seeing luckily in Wisconsin. We have a Democratic governor who's able to do that against what is ultimately a far-right legislature whose only priority is to enact maps that help them politically, that basically put as few Democratic districts as possible onto those maps, that are basically just vote sinks for all of the Democratic votes. But yes, I mean, of course, it's the most important time, not only for the democratic measures, for the issues that focus on shoring up our democracy, but even for legislative items, even for, we've had the abortion ban passed, SB 8 out of Texas, Senate Bill 8 out of Texas, and that basically banned abortion. Mississippi had their own 15-week abortion ban. When we have gubernatorial races like the ones happening in Texas, like the ones happening in Georgia, I mean, these are lines of defense against Republican legislatures that are not only just appealing to the fringes of their base, but that are basically insulated from any backlash, because again, their districts are so gerrymandered themselves that they're scientifically engineered so that they can't lose. And so these gubernatorial races are incredibly important. And so obviously with Stacey Abrams, we have case studies in Georgia that show that Democrats can win statewide. We have Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff, who both won their runoffs in 2021. Texas is a little bit of a heavier lift. We don't have that same case study, but Beto's been registering people for years. He has his organization, his PAC, Powered by People, which has been going out and registering tens of thousands of people. He's been going door to door. I'm even just following someone like Beto on social media. Every day, it's just him posting another picture of talking to a voter at their doorstep. And, eventually this ground game and the work that they're doing right now to kind of build it up is going to pay off. And so, Texas is trending blue. They can continue gerrymandering their maps, and they have, but there's only so many ways that they can delay the inevitable. So hopefully we'll see that flip in a place like Texas in 2022.
I feel like it's from somebody who's followed Beto O'Rourke's career since the start of the Senate run in 2018. It's like he's so old school in terms of how he approaches his campaigning. And part of it, and I think that's why the presidential run didn't go as long as it should have. I think because he didn't really play the game. He didn't really play the media game. He wanted to connect with people in person. And part of me is like, is that naive or is that just pure? Is that what people should be reaching for and aiming for?
Well, I mean, look, you can't run a nationalized race in a place like Texas with polarization the way that it is. But I think when Beto is able to go out and reach people and talk about the issues that actually matter beyond just the labels, the tribalistic labels that we lean on today, you know, at the end of the day, in a place like Texas, you can be a Republican through and through. You could only watch Fox News. You can never see a Democrat, have no clue what they stand for beyond what Fox News tells you, which is that, like, you know, Hillary Clinton is trying to put a lien on your bank account or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, look, we have Republican leadership in Texas that enabled a deregulated weather grid to cast a freeze on the entire state, leading to hundreds of people dying and 5 million people losing their power. And that was the result of Republican mismanagement. So I think that when you have someone like Beto who's able to go out and say, look, forget about the labels, forget about what the media wants you to know about what being a Democrat or being a Republican is. Get off your team and just recognize that there are issues that actually impact you as a person. Do you want affordable healthcare? Do you want the cost of your insulin to be lower? Do you want your 3 and 4 year olds to be able to go into pre-K so that they have somewhere to go, so that you can go enter the job market and stimulate the economy? Do you want elder care? Do you want child care? Do you want your roads and bridges fixed? Do you want waterways fixed? Like, it's not just about the D or the R after your name. And I think that Beto is super adept at being able to explain that to people in a way that they can understand in a state that is otherwise leaned on the fact that, we're a red state. We're all just Republicans, and that's how it is, because being a Republican hasn't actually helped them thus far. And I think that having someone like Beto to actually show them that is super important. So yeah, I mean, in a state like Texas, retail politics, door to door, finding people where they are is monumentally important.
So before I let you go, who, if you were betting that, and you wanted to bet on the nominees for 2024 in terms of in terms of the presidential race, and the primaries are always a shit show no matter what, right?
Yeah.
So is it Ron DeSantis on the Republican side? Is it Donald Trump? Is it Joe Biden? Is it Kamala Harris? Is it Pete Buttigieg? He seems to be getting a lot of traction lately. There's a lot of talk.
Well, I won't guess for the Democratic side, because frankly, I have no clue. If I had even a modicum of the ability to predict anything, I wouldn't have sold my Netflix stock when it was $85. But I do think on the Republican side, and again, this is, take this, with a grain of salt, but I do think it'll be Trump, because I don't think he has the ability to give his party away. I don't think he wants to be kingmaker. I think he wants to be king. I mean that literally and figuratively. So, I just kind of reading the writing on the wall, just like everybody else is. And I do think that we have to assume that it's going to be Trump running in 2024. And I think that, there are certain dangers that come with that. And I think we have to take them seriously and not just, rely on, okay, well, let's just pass some roads and bridges. That's why it's so important to pass these democratic reforms that we're trying to pass right now.
It's interesting. It'd be interesting to see who stands up out of the Republicans. Like
Yeah.
Ron DeSantis is clearly on a run for president. Like Chris Christie's campaigning at the moment, essentially.
Yeah.
And he stood up a little bit, but just from the outside looking in.
Just enough to fly under the radar from the base that would have otherwise excommunicated him. And I think that his trying to kind of toe that line, and he's shown how ineffectual someone can be. I mean, I know that he was doing that on his book tour, and I believe that the last thing I read was that he sold just over 2,000 books, and it goes to show that if you're going to try to play both sides of the coin and say, like, oh, I'm going to just mildly criticize Trump to appeal to Democrats, but then also still be a Trump, still be a through and through Republican as far as Democrats are concerned, well, there's no audience for that, and people kind of realize on both sides how much of a coward you are.
Brian, thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time.